20 years of working as a therapist, I've dealt with people who have had trauma. And it's a real common thing for people to have triggers that trigger those feelings. We hear a lot that trauma is stored in the body. And what happens when you get triggered is you feel the same feelings sometimes you had in your body. In this video, I'm going to talk about triggers, how to identify them, what types of triggers there are, and most importantly, practical steps to help you deal with these triggers. There are 3 types of triggers. There are internal triggers, external triggers, and sensory triggers. And this is pretty explanatory. Internal triggers are your thoughts and your feelings. You know, you might feel something and then it's a trigger. Or you think something and it's a trigger. And it's when you follow that all the way through to the end is when you react. And it's a quick process that happens. It's like, bam, and you react. So triggers are very important to understand. External triggers are people, places, things, situations. And so often we get triggered by a situation or a certain type of person or just things that are in your environment. Sometimes you don't expect it and it blindsides you. And then there are the sensory triggers, those triggers that are activated by sight, smell, touch, hearing, or sound. And I know that this is really prominent because our senses are so in tune. A certain fragrance or a sound or maybe seeing something. And these triggers can set us off. Triggers can be good and bad. I did a video where I talked about what I'd learned, kind of the problems people have. And at the end of that video, I'm sitting out here and this train comes by, and I had a lot of people that were like me, that the sound of the train and the sight of the train were good memories. But then there were some of you in the comments that say that you didn't like trains because you knew of somebody that had been killed by a train. And so it can trigger good or bad things. So triggers aren't all bad. But in this context, I'm more talking about things that might trigger you to react or use maladaptive behavior to change the way you feel or what you saw or how you interacted with someone else. So the first thing you have to do with these triggers is to identify them. Become aware of what your triggers are, and you don't have to know why it triggers you, you just know that it does. And then you have to, you can avoid them, interrupt them, and talk about them. Process them. But the biggest thing is to be aware of them and learn what works for you to diffuse the trigger. And sometimes it can be to just take it all the way through and respond instead of react. Many times you will be blindsided by a trigger and you will immediately react, no matter how long you've worked on yourself and personal development or coaching or therapy, or because we're human beings and these things are a part of us. And that's kind of what we mean as therapists when we talk about that trauma is stored in the body. Say you have a big presentation and you begin to get nervous about it, and you feel it in your stomach, and the next thing you know, you're ready to cancel the whole thing, and because you have some trauma in your background, and every time that trauma happened, you had that pit in your stomach, just like you're feeling when you're facing the presentation. And you may not relate the two, but that's how these triggers work. So the awareness that when you have that pit in your stomach, or that choked up feeling, or however you felt during the trauma in your body, when your body feels that again, you will be triggered. And those are internal triggers. So, you have to know yourself. And that's what's real important. To diffuse the trigger, you can avoid or leave the area or change your routine. If you know that your boss triggers you, you can avoid them somewhat. And then you interrupt the trigger, because you cannot always safeguard against triggers. You just don't know when they're going to happen. You can envision like a mental switch, like a light switch, that this triggers you and your thoughts start, and you can interrupt the thoughts by envisioning a light switch and turn it off, or a stop sign. Also, the little tool of a rubber band on your wrist, and every time you have the triggering thought, you snap the rubber band and say no. Now that one didn't ever work for me. Counting backwards works for me. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It stops the freight train. So there's a lot of things. You have to try different things. It helps to journal, meditate, and to write, to keep your internal and sensory regulated, your emotions. They're all directly tied. So these triggers, that happen can be random, or they can be, man, it. Last year, my husband and I had an accident. We were in the truck, and it was raining really, really hard, and we were hydroplaning a little bit, and this semi passes us, and it sent that truck into a spin like we were on ice, slinging us around and threw us off the road and down an incline. There was so much water that there was no traction in the easement before the line of trees, and we weren't going that fast to begin with. We'd already slowed down, and we hit a tree head on. And so all of my sensories were set off. The smell and taste of the airbags being deployed, the sound of the rain and the vehicle hitting the tree, the feel or the pain of where the seatbelt had cut into my chest. It actually cracked my sternum. And so when my chest hurts, my doctor told me it take a long time to get over that. When my chest hurts, that's that feeling. And it for a long time, it bothered me. Or, when it's raining and I want to drive, I don't want to drive in the rain. These are all triggers. I've not smelt that smell or tasted. You could taste the airbags because they deployed. Didn't hit me. The airbag didn't hit me, but the seatbelt did a lot of damage. And so it was traumatic. Wasn't injured. That was the only injury out of the whole thing. I think my husband had a bloody nose from the airbag. And but that trauma got stored in my body, so that when I feel that pain in my chest, I get a little angst. And so I've just learned to do some relaxing techniques, and to a matter of time for it to heal. So those are all triggers. I have some triggers from trauma of being in an abusive marriage. And if anyone yells or belittles me or any of that sort of thing. And so I had become aware of that, and so I thought I could safeguard myself by not being around men that acted like my first husband. I was wrong. The first time I had a trigger set off that was so unexpected was by a 13-year-old little girl in a group I was doing. And it was her demeanor and her belittling and her raised voice. So, I had her removed from my group. And then when the group was over, I went into my boss's office and processed it, because those feelings just, and then the way I felt in my body, that tightness in my chest and that stuff in my stomach. And that's how triggers affect us. And that's what we mean as clinicians when we talk about that trauma is stored in the body. So your biggest defense is to become aware of the triggers, and then to learn the coping skills to diffuse the triggers. I hope this was helpful for you today. I work with people one-on-one in coaching capacity, and I still do a little bit of therapy at a counseling office. And there's a link below on how you can work with me, coaching sessions. And if you like what I share, please hit subscribe, hit the like button, share this with maybe somebody you know might need to hear it. And the most important thing is to be you on purpose.